Corn and soybean prices is sliding in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. That's the issue we are going to discuss with Mike Zuzolo. As always, we also discuss the macroeconomic issues. Right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe. So, Mike, what's behind those slides in the mercantile exchange, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think pretty much the commodity funds are what's reducing long positions right now, Luis. I don't think it's the commodity index funds as much. And I say that because two things, and this is just developed in the last 12 or 24 hours. The Federal Reserve came out with their policy update, and they really took a pretty strong position that they still thought inflation was transitory. And Chairman Powell from the Fed specifically said that they are not ready for liftoff in terms of interest rates going up because they have not met their unemployment or their full employment goal. And so it sounded to me like they doubled down. And I think there's other analysts out there and other economists out there that are suggesting the same thing, that his commentary was pretty dovish. If that's the case, and I think it is right now because the bond yields are going down as the bond market has rallied in the aftermath of his commentary and their policy. And so you've got the dollar going higher and up against its major resistance, but you've also got the bonds going higher and yields going down. And so I think something's going to have to give. Those two situations aren't going to last for long, in my opinion. And so I think that the Fed is letting in more inflation than they should be. They're not as worried as they should be. So I think that keeps the index funds in the market in the long side of the equation, and maybe excited enough that they double down and buy extra on a pullback like we're seeing right now. The second thing that I think is even more important, because it's more about the real marketplace, that is the crude oil markets. OPEC Plus has come out and said, once again, the Biden administration asked for more than 400,000 barrels a day of production increase. Once again, OPEC Plus said, no, we're not going to do that. And I think this really puts a floor underneath the price of crude oil in the market, especially the cash market. Either we're going to have to find other sources for the extra production that we need, or we're going to have to ration demand. And I think that's where these two things, the Federal Reserve and the OPEC Plus decisions, they're big enough policy decisions. I think the inflation issue is still very much alive and kicking. And for that reason, I'm not as nervous about the break to the downside in this marketplace, in the ag space especially. I think it was kind of necessary, in fact, from a standpoint of the oats, the spring wheat, and the soybean oil are the three leaders to this correction. And I think that's actually healthy.
And it's also a factor that there will be more demand for biofuel.
Yeah, and this is a breaking story as well here in the States. Is just today, the Reuters and the other news wires, I believe, were on to the idea that governors in the United States were seeking legal ways to increase their biofuel consumption here in the next year or so because these fuel prices are getting so high. So I think your point is extremely well taken and well founded from an economic standpoint. And so my biggest concern remains the soybeans, the South American production potential, and when do the big fund traders throw in the towel and break the back of the market, and we go from an uptrend to no better than a sideways trend. That's still a major fear of mine. I probably should have pushed a little bit more out the door at around the 1250 level in November 22 beans. I had open orders working around 1255. I probably set my sights too high, thinking that the wheat and the corn could pull up the beans a little bit more than what we were getting. But I'm not ready to give up yet because we are looking on both the European model and the GFS model for the weather in the next 10 days. Another big cold front coming through, another big shot of rain coming through in the central corn belt. And that's really going to disrupt our harvesting with producers just now getting back in the fields and going very, very slowly. I talked to a client in Indiana just today before we went on the air, and he told me that some of the producers that he's talked to in the neighborhood had been harvesting soybeans at 20% moisture. And that's just because they're so scared they're not going to get in the fields again if they don't get them out now. So another big rain shot. There's a lot of corn and a lot of beans left in Illinois and Indiana and Ohio at this point.
And you are thinking that the safrinha corn in Brazil is going to be reduced because of fertilizer cost, but still, I think it's too early to tell because we are still planting the first corn crop and then we will have to harvest and plant again. So it's a long way to go.
Yes, you're right. And I think this is really timely. And I think we really want to stay on this because I haven't read the article yet. So I don't know. And I haven't checked out the article to make sure it's got, a good, valid source to it. But I saw crossing the news wires today a lawsuit that was being generated by large coffee companies against Brazilian growers now. And I bet it has to do with the fertilizer because I have read and have sourced out pretty decent analysis that would suggest that the coffee growers are too lacking a lot of fertilizer and they're just not going to have the coffee beans that they need to meet their contracts at this point. And that's kind of in the here and now, from what I understand. So, have you heard anything or anything, any of your people talked about that recently?
Yeah, and another farmers are the sugarcane growers that are very worried about this fertilizer situation.
Well, there again, there's your ethanol market for China,
Yeah.
because Brazil has essentially taken the ethanol market pretty much from the United States in terms of sugarcane ethanol going to China and Brazilian exports. So I still think that there's a lot to be written on this story and that we're not near the final chapter, especially since we heard and saw that Russia is going to limit their exports of fertilizer for the next 6 months. I just continue to see more and more delays and not just not knowing what the price is, but even knowing whether you're going to get this and secure the supplies. I talked to a really good client in Illinois this week. He had just gotten done getting his winter wheat planted. He plants soft red wheat since he's in Illinois, soft red wheat. And he talked about getting his fertilizer needs met for corn. And his fertilizer dealer literally told him that he's probably at $1,300 a ton. And that's if he can get it for springtime. Well, the national fertilizer price, the bid right now is a little over 1,000. And so we just don't even know what the price is at this point, Luis. And that doesn't even answer or come close to answering whether it's going to be had or not in terms of getting the supply in. And I think this is where the ag space has probably more inflation to run because of labor shortages with meat packers, with the fertilizer issue, and with just the supply chain being kinked up so badly, it's not going to go well for the end users like it has. I'm just finishing up an article with another agriculture media guy who's writing an article about the supply chain and in the agriculture space and that just in time inventory mindset of buying what you need when you need it. I think that's going to have to be unwound in agriculture, and end users are going to sit on more stocks than they've been used to the last 20 or 30 years.
And wheat has presented a different story, right?
Yes, it has. And I think the wheat has come back in favor, in my mind, more favorable with this price break back down because we were just simply getting too expensive. Europe continues to sell a lot of wheat. Middle East continues to buy, and Russia continues to get in that market along with Romania and Ukraine to a lesser degree. But the European market is still pretty red hot at this point. We're still searching for protein around the world. That's why your oats, that's why your spring wheat are the leaders to the upside in the big picture. But I like the wheat from a standpoint of correcting here. We're back at around that 770 area in soft red wheat. We broke above 770. That was a rock solid resistance level up until this month. Now we're testing that as support because that was our old 2021 highs. So if the soft red wheat can hold that level, that may be an indication technically that we could have another leg higher in the soft red wheat led by the hard red. And I say led by the hard red because I think the hard red conditions are really something to watch next week because they're better than last year, but we're not getting the rainfall that we need in Kansas and Oklahoma right now. So keep an eye on the winter wheat conditions next Monday.
Now, in this time of heated inflation, do you think there will be more supply of low cost crops?
Yes, there will be, but I think that'll come at the expense of yields. And so I think this is where you're going to have a situation where you're going to need to pull prices up, like hay and alfalfa, other, even fodder type crops that you would pasture, in terms of planting for your livestock needs, like for your cattle. They're not there yet from the last time I've checked. And so we really haven't economically turned on the switch of calling in all the substitutes that are out there by raising prices and getting the farmers to move towards those substitutes, because the corn price in December futures is still, locked down below that 550 level.
And still in the meat market, do you think there will be an improvement for those hog and chicken producers?
The hog producers, I think, are coming into a major low here seasonally, because the ham season, I think, is going to be extra good with much higher priced poultry, much higher priced turkeys. Plus, we saw a really big turnaround in the pork export sales this week, Luis. A big, big turnaround in terms of a big number. And we saw China as the number two buyer. So I don't think the hogs are going to pressure the cattle as much. Cattle, however, were in both of them, for this matter, they may be limited in terms of upside potential at some point, because I'm hearing more and more labor problems with meat packing companies not being able to retain workers, and therefore the shackle space is not as available as it could be. They're really wanting to expand because of the profitability, but from what I understand, they're not going to be able to expand because they just can't get the labor and the employment numbers up to be able to expand their numbers.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Luis. Have a great week.